Hello my beautiful people, welcome back to my channel. Today's video I'm very excited to do because we're going to be talking about eyeshadow palettes. I like talking about eyeshadow palettes. I know you like talking about eyeshadow palettes. We all love eyeshadow palettes, so today's video is all about just that. And from the title of this video, you already have figured out that this is eyeshadow palette tag 5000. So this specific tag was created by Chick Geek here on the platform. I will have her video and channel linked in the description box for you to check her out. I myself have a pretty extensive eyeshadow palette collection. A lot of my videos and content is based on eyeshadow palettes. So I really enjoyed this idea and I thought I would share my version of this tag. So if you're new here, hi, my name is Eve. I love all things beauty. Here on my channel, I share about makeup, skincare, hair care, and at times lifestyle things like travel, fashion, and lifestyle vlogs. And if that sounds like your thing, I hope you stick around, enjoy this video, and subscribe to my channel. And now without further ado, let's dive into eyeshadow palette tag 5000. So there are 10 questions in this eyeshadow palette tag, and I will be popping them here on the screen for you. The question number 1 was palette you wore on a special occasion. This question was a little bit of a hard one to answer for me because I am the type of person who loves celebrate everything, okay? I love celebrating life. I just generally love celebrating things and staying positive and marking your milestones no matter how big or small they are. I also wear makeup pretty much every single day. So I really needed to think about this one, but not overthink it. So I decided to choose a palette that I wore on my birthday. My birthday falls on New Year's Eve. So we had a house party and I decorated the entire house in like silver and gold. My Christmas tree was all silver and I had a silver outfit. So I wanted to do a really beautiful smoky eye with silver lid. I reached for this palette. This is what I've used on that day, and this is a Cutie Palette Platinum from NABLA. Here, I think I gemmed a brush here in this shade, and it is so creamy and so soft that I didn't want to mess with it, so I just kind of left it like this, so it looks a little bit weird. I generally love this palette. If you wanted to see my entire NABLA ranking video, it's already live on my channel because I pretty much have every single NABLA eyeshadow palette. This is a palette that is very, very festive to me because it does have very nice depth. You can definitely create a beautiful smoky eyes with these two shades. And these metallics, these three are slightly bit different, but this metallic, I gotta show to you. I have to very gently touch it because it's the softest, the creamiest one you've ever seen. My camera doesn't even want to focus, it's that reflective, but this is the most beautiful silver shade I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm not even saying in my collection. Oh, this is the most beautiful silver metallic, like melted metal on your lid shade that I've ever seen in my entire life. So I basically had a smoky eye with this silver all over my lid and I felt so glam and beautiful. So this is definitely the palette that has a good memory. So question number 2, what is the palette you love but it is repetitive? Here in this category, I put the new mod palette from Sigma Beauty. And this palette is considerably new to my collection and I absolutely love this beautiful boudoir velvet pink packaging. Kind of matches my Barbie nails today. This is the palette that is muted glam to me. This is a palette that is somewhat monochromatic. You do get a gradient here from lightest to darkest. I personally very much enjoy Sigma eyeshadow palette formula. I love the mattes and I especially love the shimmers. Some of them are more of your toppers and some of them they're like more fully foiled, fully pigmented shimmers. At first some of these shades look different, but once you start playing with them and placing them on your eyes and blending them together, you do get somewhat of the same looks. Regardless of all that, I still really love this palette very much because it is one of those palettes that is kind of like a no-brainer. This is one of the benefits that I see of owning something like this because you do get different colors, you do get a little bit more of a variety of kind of the same shades, but you don't have to really overthink about the looks that you're going to create because you can mix and match whatever you want on your lid and it would still blend into each other nicely because it's kind of somewhat monochromatic story. So question number 3, what is the palette you got your money's worth? So to answer this question, I went with the face palette from Natasha Denona. It is technically a face palette and it is expensive item. This palette has traveled with me so many times. I am almost hitting pan on this highlighter because there is a significant dent here. This blush I've used a good amount. These eyeshadows have been used a lot. This is the lighter version of the palette because it came in 2 color variations. So these shades are just so easy to use on my complexion. There's not too much of a contrast between those shades. So whenever I need to do something light, out of the door, super fast, I don't need to think about it. Just kind of slap it on your face and go. I can easily reach for these. And the shimmer shades here are so gorgeous and so reflective. I know some people had difficulty with this cream blush formula, but I personally did not. So I think that I definitely got my money worth with this whole entire palette. And I've featured this palette in many of my videos, and I've said that before and I will say it one more time here, that if this palette would disappear out of my life, I would be next day in Sephora needing to repurchase it. For question number 4, what is the palette that is an amazing deal? So to answer this question, I thought that I would talk about the palette that didn't really get a lot of attention at all. The brand is very well known, but I don't think it's very popular here on the platform. Here and there, people would talk about it, but not so much. I feel like their launches come fast and go fast as well. This palette was the first time I've tried the eyeshadow palette formula from the brand, and I was actually quite surprised at how good it is for the money that you're paying for it. So this is a Harvest palette from Profusion Makeup. You can see that I have significant dents in some of these shades because whenever I got this, I was using this palette nonstop because I think it launched like late in the summer and it was like transitioning from summer to fall. I use this palette so many times. I do have reels and more photos on my Instagram if you wanted to see some inspirational looks. This palette is $10. Primarily this palette is heavy on green, but then you get some warmer tones, some golds, oranges. You can definitely create several different, completely different looks from each other with this palette. The shimmers in this palette are so nice and so easy to work with. They're reflective. They are layering really nicely by themselves or on top of other shades. They are very beautiful, soft and creamy, and then the mattes are very easy to work with. It's definitely not a super pigmented formula. If you're thinking of some independent beauty brands, the ones that are like super pigmented, with one little dip you get a lot of opacity with your mattes, this is not the type of formula. It is more on the lighter side and lets you build up the shades, which to my personal opinion preference, it is a really nice formula for a day wear. And that's why I used it so much, because I would want to wear something green or like warmer tones throughout the day with some beautiful shimmers on my lid, and I would use this palette over and over. There's some different shimmer formulations here. Like this is a beautiful topper shade, so soft, so beautiful, so ethereal. And there are some, I have longer nails, so it's harder for me to get into the smaller pans. This is like a beautiful, almost like a duochrome shade. It has shift from gold to green, so stunning. This shade is so pretty. Like this cooler toned shimmer is so beautiful. And then this green one is my favorite. Look how stunning these are, so reflective. Like this shade is so gorgeous. I know these are only picked up with fingers, but they absolutely look the same on eyes. This palette quality definitely exceeded my expectations and is definitely a great deal for being $10. So question number 5 is the eyeshadow quad you love and wish was a larger palette. So for this question, I actually had to modify it a little bit because I love generally eyeshadow palettes, the ones that are a little bit bigger, the ones that are giving you a little bit more of a variety of shades. I only have 2 quads right now. I will show to you what it is, but the palette that I'm actually going to be answering this question with is a different one. I'm going to show you the quad that I have. It's this one from Hard Candy, and it has very simple warm tone color story. I do have a second version of this, the one that has like yellow and brown tones, but it kind of falls in the same category of very neutral warm tone palettes. So if I would answer this question with this palette, I just don't think I would be truthful, because this formula is very nice to work with, but I do have many other warm tone palettes in my collection because I love my warm tone neutrals so much that I have this color story many times again and again in my collection. So using this palette, answering this question almost did not make sense to me. And I hope it makes sense to you too. So I kind of modified this question and thought of which small palette you love you wish was a larger palette. I do have a good amount of 5-pan palettes, but majority of them are Natasha Denona 5-pan palettes. And if you know that Natasha Denona mini palettes, they're almost like a smaller version of her larger palette. So that also got eliminated very quickly. So I thought of the next small size palette that I had in my collection that I wish was larger. The palette that I chose to answer this question with is Cutie Palette Midnight from NABLA. This is a very curated blue color story. Last year, I was looking for a blue palette to add to my collection, and this was the one. Whenever I saw this color story, I said, yes, this is the blue that I need, because I do love this cobbled blue, like super bright, beautiful cobbled blue for a smoky blue eye, and this is a beautiful baby blue. NABLA eyeshadow palette formula is one of my favorites to work with, and like I mentioned earlier, I do have pretty much every single eyeshadow palette that's available right now. I do not own the ones that were discontinued previously. Also, their new launch is on the way to me. It should be delivered sometime this week. This palette was a part of the 6-pan launch, and these palettes were somewhat curated. That was the purpose of them, to be curated to the story. I love this palette so much. I really wish this was a 9-pan or a 12-pan palette. I would love to see a little bit more of neutral tones, maybe here, maybe another matte blue, something that's a little bit brighter like this. It's just a little bit more of a variety. I wouldn't mind. So I think this is an exceptional quality palette that is so beautiful. Whatever is here is absolutely stunning. I love and enjoy this palette so much that I wouldn't mind to see a larger version of this. Question number 6, what is the eyeshadow palette that you love the quality of the eyeshadow but hate the packaging? Okay, I definitely have one. This is a palette that I personally love and enjoy very much because I do love the shades and colors in that palette. I use it quite often, and I know that this palette wasn't received well by beauty community, but that's okay for us to disagree with what we prefer. And this is a Wild Greens from Urban Decay. I do appreciate how thin this packaging is. However, it opens like this, and whenever you're making the looks, you have to flip this over. Sometimes it doesn't stay. It kind of like flaps out like this. So it's not an ideal packaging. I understand they were trying to be creative. As much as I really love this palette, I really love this color story, my greens and corals, I just find this packaging a little bit annoying. So question number 8, palettes you like to combine together. Currently 3 palettes in my collection that I reach for as a companion palettes. The ones that have been a reach for the most recently, I would say. So the first palette is Desert Lights, which is a 6-pan with all shimmers. This is an excellent companion palette if you love super impactful, fully foiled shimmers. This is an incredible formula because these shimmers are just truly over the board incredible. The other palette that I zhuzhed through all your ears about recently is the Gardens by Juvia's. I absolutely die for the shimmers that are in this palette. Some of these shimmers are more of your toppers and some of them a little bit more opaque shimmers. Stunning formula. The ones that give you like wet lid effect, I love. Then the last palette as a companion palette is Lost in Los Angeles from BH Cosmetics. This is a very much loved companion palette for me, and especially I reach for this palette for this matte white. It's exceptionally good. Question number 9 is, what is a large palette you wish was smaller? I think this was a pretty easy question for me to answer. This is Mothership Mega Celestial Nirvana palette. This was a limited edition, limited holiday edition of last year. I like this formula. I love the shimmers. I love the mattes. I just feel like this palette is unnecessarily large. There's so much wasted space in between. I did have a dedicated video review on this palette with look tutorials if you wanted to look any further into it. I definitely had more to say about this, but to my opinion, this palette, for being limited edition, a holiday palette, something that's not gonna last for too long and only being available for a very short period of time, it is unnecessarily large. There's so much wasted space. I would be perfectly okay with having even smaller pans, but having them a little bit more compact and not being this heavy. This specific palette has a really nice balance between mattes and shimmers, which a lot of times in Pat McGrath Mothership palettes, you would see 2 or 3 mattes and then it would be heavy on shimmers. This palette specifically appealed to me because it had half shimmers, half mattes. I understand it could be a very much a collectible item for many people, but I just wish this was so much smaller and lighter. This palette is really, really heavy. Show your dream palette with singles. For this question, I also had to do a small cheat, or maybe a big cheat. I generally prefer full color story palettes versus smaller eyeshadow palettes, or singles especially. That being said, I only have a good handful of single eyeshadows and I generally don't reach for them as often as I would reach for my eyeshadow palettes. To be honest, a lot of times I just do forget about them. That being said, I don't have enough single eyeshadows to show you my ideal eyeshadow palette. However, I do have a palette in my collection that I think it is an absolute perfection. To me, it is an absolute perfection. I would not want to change anything. I could if I really wanted to, but it's really not necessary. What I'm trying to say is that if I would create my own palette, it probably would look very similar, if not identical to this. And this is my dream palette from Natasha Denona. This is perfection to me. I'm a huge neutrals lover. I do love my warm neutrals. I also love to play with cooler neutrals at times. I love my smoky eyes. I really love a beautiful reflective shimmers, the one that you can see from a block away. And I do love this corner right here. There's a little bit of like burgundy purple color in here. I do love burgundies a lot. And there is a duochrome shade here that is absolutely stunning. To me, this is perfection. So if I would create my own palette, a neutral palette, there's a high chance it would look very similar to this. So the last question, number 10, and this is a fun one. What is the eyeshadow palette you wish had a matching face palette? Okay, I definitely had one, and I think it was pretty easy question for me to answer because I kind of got drawn to this palette right away because I love this palette so much. It's so much fun. This palette is so much fun. Whenever I got this palette, I was like, wow, this is incredible. The quality is incredible. The color story is so much fun. This is a Hocus Pocus 2 from ColourPop. This was launched this past Halloween last year. This color story is a perfection for Halloween. The pigment of mattes, the shimmers are just so beautiful, and I really love how this palette is organized. It's very easy to create looks, and of course you can mix and match them the way you want it. When this palette was launched, it was launched as a collection. There was a colorful mascara, there were some jelly shadows like in the pot. There were also some lip glosses. I only picked up the palette from the entire collection, but I really wish there was a face palette to this. I would love to see maybe like a beautiful bright orange blushes, maybe with some iridescent highlighters, something that would shift within these colors, maybe something purplish or green shifty highlighters. Obviously you can wear this palette throughout the entire year and wear it on any given day, but this was launched for Halloween. This has a Halloween theme to it, and the Hocus Pocus movie is one of my favorite. I watch that movie every single year. It's like a tradition. I would love to have that face palette with iridescent highlighters to match some of these shades to create those super fun Halloween-y looks. So these are all the questions. I hope you had fun and enjoyed this video. I had so much fun answering this eyeshadow palette tag 5,000 questions and going through my eyeshadow palette collection and seeing what I have to answer these questions. I will have a Chick Geeks video and her channel linked in the description box underneath this video for you to check out her original video. And also, if you are a creator and if you're gonna jump on the train creating the same fun video, tag me in your videos. I would love to see which eyeshadow palettes you selected to answer these questions. If you enjoyed this video, give this a big thumb up. It does help my channel out. And if you're not yet a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe to my channel before you leave today. Thanks so much for watching and hanging out with me today, and I will see you in my next videos. Bye.